Has this ever happened to you?
Gosh, I like video games so much, but I only have $10. What am I gonna do?
Well, my monetarily challenged friend, have I got the list for you. Today, I'd like to talk about the top 5 Steam games for under $10. Now, before we get started, there's a couple of criteria we need to go over. The base price has to be what's under $10, so no cheating with Steam sales. The game has to have been originally released on Steam, so we're going to discount ports. And finally, we're going to ignore free-to-play games entirely because that's just cheating. So, without further ado, let's begin. At number 5, we have Cook Serve Delicious. Cook Serve Delicious is a restaurant simulator that attempts to accurately recreate the daily perils of running an actual restaurant. Players are tasked with keeping up with customer orders by inputting a specific set of keyboard commands for each recipe, adjusting to fit specific demands. They'll also have to deal with chores, upgrading the restaurant, managing the budget, and dealing with the dreaded health inspector. The game's overall atmosphere is frantic and intense, guaranteed to keep you on the edge of your seat the whole time you're playing, as well as convince you that you never want to open an actual real restaurant in the actual real world. Number 4 goes to Skullgirls. An arcade fighting game, Skullgirls allows players to duke it out with a roster of colorful characters in a Street Fighter-esque combat system, both via local multiplayer and through the magic of the internet. The mechanics of the game place an importance on comboing and mixing up your ground and aerial attacks, creating a fast and frantic combat experience. Don't have friends? No problem. The game also features a single-player campaign for each character, as well as a versus AI mode in which you can own your skills until your fingers bleed. At number 3, we have Papers, Please. Taking place in the fictional dystopia of Arstotzka, Papers, Please has you playing as a border control officer, deciding whether or not to let migrants into the country. The regulations for entry in the fascist nation of Arstotzka are quite strict, but ultimately it's up to the player whether to decide to follow the rules to the letter or to bend them in service to better human nature. With a compelling and in-depth story featuring multiple endings and an overall grim and haunting atmosphere, Papers, Please is a game that'll have you coming back for more. Plus, if you think about it, it's really pretty topical.
Hey, no Trump jokes!
Number 2 goes to Portal. A Steam Library classic, Portal is a puzzle platformer that follows the story of Chell, a woman who wakes up in the Aperture Science testing chambers with no recollection of how she got there. Guided by the ever-present AI GLaDOS, Chell must use a device called the Portal Gun to navigate her way to the end of the test chambers, preferably while staying alive if possible. With delightfully tricky puzzles, a surprisingly gripping narrative, and, yet again, an incredible atmosphere, Portal is a must-play in any gamer's library, especially if you've only got $10 to burn. Finally, coming in at number 1 is Undertale. A cross between a JRPG, a bullet hell, and a puzzle game, Undertale gives the player control of a child who's fallen into a realm of monsters and tasks the player with staying alive. The game subverts traditional JRPG expectations by giving all of the NPC enemies and monsters colorful personalities, and it's up to the player whether or not to kill them and gain EXP, or to try to find a way to resolve the conflict peacefully. Combat itself takes place in a sort of turn-based bullet hell scenario, and trying to figure out how to get a monster to stop fighting without killing it is often an interesting intellectual challenge. All of this is wrapped up in a brilliant soundtrack and a quirky sort of humor reminiscent of the old Nintendo classic Earthbound, a game to which this can almost be considered a spiritual successor. Featuring some of the finest writing of any game of this generation, Undertale is a game that everyone should get the chance to experience at least once, and the price point just makes it all the better. Well, that about wraps this list up. Join me next week when I attempt to auction off my organs so I can make a list of the best Steam games over $10. I've been Tyler James, and assuming somebody wants my kidneys, I'll see you soon.